Welcome back. It is Friday here at the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios. It's a beautiful one on top of that. Jim Coyle with you as always. Alec Lasley from the Hoosier.com joining me now. Plenty to talk about coming up this weekend. Recruiting the Charlie Hughes. But before we get to that, the big news coming out that many of us thought was going to happen, and that is going to be the case. Indiana is going to be hosting the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill for the Big Ten ACC Challenge. Alec, that is going to be another top A-plus game for Indiana.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, going into this summer, over the last month, I think everyone kind of figured that's what the matchup was going to be like, with everyone coming back for North Carolina off of a national championship game appearance there, and then you get the news Trace Jackson Davis is coming back, Grace Thompson's coming back. You add obviously the incoming freshman for Indiana, a team that's supposed to not only compete at the top of the Big Ten, but goes into this offseason as the favorite in the Big Ten, going up against the favorite in the ACC, if not one of the favorites to win the entire thing next year in North Carolina, especially with the addition of Pete Nance. So, this is, we finally know it. It's obviously going to be a phenomenal matchup, a really fun matchup. IU seems to have Carolina's number when it comes to ACC Big Ten Challenge the last few years that they've played in Bloomington. So should be a really good game, should be a really intense game. Really, really great environment that I think a lot of the fans are going to be extremely excited for, especially coming off of, Kansas, coming off of Arizona, and going right into basically another Final Four type matchup, right, when you look at it. So Indiana's going to be tested early. We knew that. Now we're starting to see exactly who they play. I think this will be a nice home game for them after a very tough few road games to kind of kick off the season. But this is exactly what Mike Woodson wanted, was to bring these types of games back to Bloomington, bring Indiana back to the national spotlight. And he's surely done that in these first month and a half to 2 months of this upcoming season with the matchups that they're going to be in.
The thing that is amazing to me is how quickly he's been able to not just do one thing, but there have been a lot of things checked off already. You go back to making the tournament, beating Purdue, all that stuff that we talked about last year. That's a lot of boxes there. The recruiting, bam, turning around. Now the schedule. And man, are they going to be tested early? And it's a test that they're going to have to, they don't have to ace it, but they have to pass it, because if you were to really get dinged, that would be bad for the confidence going into the conference season, I would imagine.
I mean, yes and no. Obviously, you can't go out there and lay an egg against all three of these teams. And in the Gavitt games, which we should find out, in the next week here, if not sooner. So you can't go out and go, for when it comes to those games. But at the same time, Mike Woodson is trying to get this team ready for the Big Ten, trying to get this team ready for the NCAA tournament. Indiana's still going to have some pieces to kind of mix in early in the season. So it wouldn't surprise me to see them struggle to get going, but show those flashes that I think everyone's expecting come season's end. Whereas a North Carolina team obviously returning basically every key member of their team last year, obviously have to add in Pete Nance and kind of see what that role is going to look like replacing Brady Manick. But that is a matchup that you want as Indiana. You want to go up against a lot of these top nationally recognized programs who are going to be good early in the season, who are going to be good in the middle of the season, and most importantly, are going to be good at the end of the season. Not only to obviously boost that resume, but let's hope Indiana doesn't need any sort of resume boosting when it comes to the selection show in March. But Indiana is facing three of the top teams in the country, and are going to go headfirst into these matchups every single year. And Indiana just needs to compete. They need to obviously win a couple of those games, but They don't need, the world is not going to collapse if they lose 2 of those 3 games, right? Unless they get absolutely run off the floor, which I don't envision happening. Indiana just needs to get the confidence that, one, they are that team in the Big Ten that can compete against all these nationally recognized teams and be able to do so consistently. And this is the first start for them.
Well, and we can't forget there's going to be a fourth addition to this schedule, and it could potentially be Villanova with the Gavitt games against the Big East opponent. So, but the schedule that they have been able to put together is incredible, and then it adds another element to it: the sheer fact that Indiana is going to be. These are all going to be nationally televised games. These are going to be prime time. The North Carolina game that could be a primetime nighttime game. The Saturday games obviously are probably going to be afternoon games, but still, these are games that people are going to watch. These are brands. These are the brands that people want. Indiana, Kansas, Indiana, Arizona, and Indiana, North Carolina. They want that stuff, especially when they're good. It's what people want, and Indiana can do themselves a gigantic favor. The recruiting obviously has jumped miles, but you do well on TV. Recruits are watching these games. These players are watching these games. They're fans like everybody else. So they're also watching these games, and you beat teams. You go into Kansas and beat Kansas. That's going to get you attention from a lot of people, including future recruits.
Yeah. And honestly, just for the success of this team, you go into Kansas, you win that game. Even if you don't win that game, that's just an experience that's going to be their first true road game for these freshmen. What better way to kick off your first true road game than at Allen Fieldhouse, which is obviously one of the best arenas in all of college basketball, if not in all of basketball. You get kind of introduced to the college basketball world immediately. So we're going to see what these freshmen are made of, which I think we all know that they're pretty ready for the moment. But we're also going to see what this team does when they get kind of punched in the mouth. We saw last year they were able to respond, but we saw that they got punched too often in the mouth, either right at the beginning of the game or right at the start of the second half. And if you do that against some of these bigger programs in North Carolina or a Kansas or in Arizona, you're not going to be able to come back from a lot of those games. As good as the Big Ten was last year, as good as they are consistently, Kansas and North Carolina traditionally are obviously in a different realm than most of those Big Ten programs when it comes to high level success in the NCAA tournament. And so these are the matchups you want year in and year out, and these are just going to benefit them when they do get into Big Ten play, and they do face a deficit, or they are writing 3 games in 5 days and they need to dig a little bit deeper. These are the games and the moments that they're going to kind of reflect back on and be able to take from and build from moving forward.
And in addition, before this, they would not have been prepared. They would not have been ready, and it may have been a bad move for Indiana to have these guys on the schedule last year, because it would not have been, or the year before especially, probably would not have been a good result. They just weren't there yet. Now they've got the mix and a team that most of us think is going to be competitive at pretty much any level. We'll certainly find out, but this is a team that I think will be able to go in and compete with those guys. They've got new elements. They've got people like Jalen Hood-Schifino, who we'll hear from in the next segment, but they've got pieces that they did not have before that is going to allow them to competitively play these type of teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what Mike Woodson wanted to do, right? He knew to get back to taking Indiana to win Big Ten championships, to make Sweet 16s, Final Fours, and everything like that, he needed to improve the roster. He needed to get freshmen who could come in and play immediately and really build up that depth, and not so much just the depth, but the talented depth that we've been talking about. And we've now seen in these first few weeks of summer workouts then how intense the workouts are, how talented this team is. We've heard it from a few different people from top to bottom, and how talented that freshman class is. And, you look at what Mike Woodson has been able to do in such a short period of time when it comes to getting high level prospects into the Indiana program. And what you touched on, obviously playing these games is just another recruiting tool, but winning these games eventually is what ultimately gets these guys to come to Indiana without you really having to do much recruiting at all. These are what these high level recruits want to play in. Game in and game out, you already get that for the most part in the Big Ten. Now you move out of conference and playing these big games, and it's just an additional tool that Mike Woodson now has in his pocket that honestly he doesn't really have to use all too often based off of the success that he's had on the recruiting trail up to this point.
And two things that we haven't mentioned. Number one, no pun intended, North Carolina currently listed as the preseason number one by some people. So there's that. Indiana's going to be playing a number one team potentially, if they're still number one. And both Mason Williams from the Hoosier.com points out that both of the participants in last year's national championship game are on Indiana's schedule. So you talk about really ramping it up. That just continues to add to that. Indiana's playing the reigning national champion and the team that could have been a national champion. So that, again, getting back into those conversations, having Indiana in those conversations, it's so important because they haven't been there for a long, long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you get Trace Jackson Davis, Armando Bacot. You have the really talented backcourts now of Xavier Johnson, Jalen Hood-Schifino going up against Caleb Love and RJ Davis. And kind of the storyline that a lot of people probably have either forgotten about or just haven't realized, but you get two Northwestern teammates in Miller Kopp and Pete Nance now going up against each other. So a lot of really good storylines in that one. Obviously, outside of just two historically great programs playing each other in obviously Assembly Hall, you can't get too much better than that. So we got a long ways to go before we get there. A lot of time before the season starts, but you're starting to get back into raising those expectations that everyone now has for Indiana, not only locally and regionally, but also nationally. And I think that's the biggest thing for Indiana. Now they just have to go out, compete, and win these games, and build on the success and the momentum that Mike Woodson has brought to Bloomington in the last 12 to 16 months.